opportunities of Newtown are. In the second workshop, we showed you back some of those ideas that we had gathered from the first workshop, and then we asked you to, I suppose, to critique them, to review and see what was working and what was not working. We've gone away since and we've taken that feedback. We've also done that online, and through that feedback we've been able to refine some of the ideas and improve them. Some of the other ideas we've removed because either they weren't really matching with the ambition, or maybe there was a project already on the go, or there was some other element around that. So the list of projects that we have at the moment, we're looking at this workshop to see how is it possible that we could deliver those projects. So they move from everything from sort of mobility to public realm. There's questions about ownership, there's questions about who are the key stakeholders. So again, we want to learn from the community about who we need to involve in this process, what are the constraints and opportunities towards delivering these projects. The final master plan delivery then, as Stephen said, will be coming in November. So we'll take again all of the feedback from this session and we'll bring that into the final plan. So to start this workshop, we asked in the previous ones how people wanted to see Newtown in 2050, and we got a selection of ambitions or wishes for the town. They wanted to see improved transport system, improved facilities for locals, improved facilities for youth, a family-friendly town, a heritage town, local employment in retail and hospitality, no commuting, a gateway town, gateway to the gardens of Ireland, gateway to Wicklow Mountains and the sea, leading green tourism and employment, a climate resilient town, a green hub, green town, ecological hub, a place to experience nature, local resilient economy, green energy, local food production, to be self-sufficient, to extend the forest, to have more trees, to have people and nature thriving together. The challenges as we see it at the moment, the current challenges are around the rapid growth that has happened to Newtown. The fact that Newtown is a dormitory town with a lot of people working outside of it, the lack of what has been understood as community infrastructure, traffic and mobility issues, underutilised green spaces, safety and accessibility on streets, the fact that some of the areas within the town feel disjoint, some of the new areas from the old, and some of the green spaces that are not connecting, the lack of economic activity, and I suppose that really puts us at two ends of a spectrum. What we see as the current challenges, the things that we have to deal with now, and the future ambition, the future potential of Newtown, where we would like to see Newtown in 2050 or into the future. So the hope is that this Town Centre First plan will be a tool to bridge that. So we look at the immediate challenges and how we can resolve some of those, while also looking longer term and putting steps in place to create a more sustainable future for the town. The 6 key themes that we've built the plan or building the plan around are mobility, the public realm, green space, community services, employment and commerce, and sustainable growth. And it'll be the combination of these key themes that we will see the ideas and proposals come from that will form the basis of the plan. We've already mentioned there's been previous workshops where we've had great engagement from the community members, and we've also had a very engaged online feedback. So we've had, I think, over 85 people respond online. I think over 60 of those were in the last workshop, and that has given us great input as to what is working and not working in the proposals. So to jump straight into it, mobility, that was one of the key areas that was highlighted because the rapid growth within Newtown, and also that's, I suppose, key to really unlocking the public realm space and making sure that we can deliver ideas around that successfully. Challenges around mobility, people talked about Fisher's Junction, the general flow of traffic within the town, the new road not being used, just to name a few of them. And we've proposed a number of key strategies for how we can deal with that. So increasing cycle and foot permeability, to provide clear route hierarchy so people understand which is the best way to go, to improve public transport distribution so people maybe rely less on their car, to improve and optimize traffic flow, to discourage main street traffic so people are using the orbital route whenever that is sufficient, to encourage main street footfall because we want a vibrant and active public realm, and to encourage active travel, so that's people walking and cycling. The first project we're going to look at is the Greenway connections, and this really came from the desire to have a connection from the mountains to the sea. There's already been a proposal around this Greenway and potentially linking up with the East Coast Greenway as well. So the idea that Newtown would become a node in this trail or walking slash cycling infrastructure. The feedback overall was very positive, 98% of people approving of it, and then a very high percentage of people also approving of it as it was proposed. So we have some specific elements of feedback there from the community group. We also had a variety of different routes and proposals, and within the scope of this project there's only so much that's possible to do. So what we're proposing to do is really simplify this, to not be specific about any routes, but show that there's a real desire from the community to have cycle and greenway infrastructure connecting from the east through to Newtownmountkennedy to Kilpedert, Kilcool, and the neighbouring towns and villages. The next project is about improved public transport or bus connections. We know that there are sort of fairly frequent bus connections from the south to the north, from Wicklow to Greystones and to Dublin, but Newtown isn't very well served from east to west. So the proposal here was to look at Local Link as an option to connect from Roundwood through to Newtown, to Kilcool and to Greystones. So again, this is something we've looked at. We've actually talked to the NTA about the previous routes, how they were developed, what the feedback was on that. We're also still looking at getting additional feedback, but in general from the community it was very positive. There was concerns about low demand and how do you make sure that that's not an issue, and there was also additional feedback on potentially linking up wider areas. So again, we've gone back to the different organisations related to this, and what we can do in a plan of this scope is really make the argument that there is a desire to move from the west to the east, that we need some type of bus route connection through that, and to have a feasibility study to understand what would be the most appropriate routes to deliver that ambition. The next project is looking at connecting the Greenway cycle infrastructure. So over the last number of years, with the new building that has gone on the periphery of the town, we've also had the introduction of new cycleways, but those cycleways end at the points where the older part of the town comes into connection with it. So what we've looked at is, if we have this wider regional cycle infrastructure, can we connect up with that, and can we link in some of the residential areas within Newtown to make those cycle friendly zones? So something like this might evolve into something like this, where we have dedicated active travel infrastructure connecting into the town, and again what that might look like. More positive feedback, still up on the mid to high 90s, and again also in terms of how it was proposed, people were very positive in the feedback. One of the concerns that did come through was the idea that the main street itself might not be big enough for dedicated cycle infrastructure. So what we've looked at there is the idea that the main street could be a cycle friendly zone, where we have slow traffic moving through it, making it more friendly for cyclists, giving them ample space, but not having dedicated cycleways. And we'll come back to what that might look like later in the presentation. We've also looked at the idea of having bike parking at different points along the route, so that if you are moving from your bike to foot, for example, as you come to the main street, that you have a place to lock up the bike. So this is what we call the idea of modal shift, moving from one means of transport to another. The next project was around a proposal for a new bus route. So the existing bus route goes through the main street, but with the addition of the orbital road, there has been the construction of new bus stops along that. We also know that there is a site designated for a future school, and beside that would make sense to sort of link in another bus stop, so that you could have an additional bus route that would go more on the periphery of the town. So this is something, again, we've discussed with the NTA, and they are looking at that, and they're considering it as something that they can potentially bring into future plans or proposals. So this is something we can advocate for as part of the plan. And again, generally the feedback on this was very positive. Then linked to this idea was a proposal for a park and ride, a bus park and ride. We had two proposed locations, one close to the business park and one close to Fisher's Junction. So we've looked at that, we've gone through to the different agencies. The proposal in general was well received, but you can see, although it was still mostly positive in terms of how it was proposed, there were concerns around that, and the concerns are really about having something like this within the town or close to the main street. So having looked at the NTA's larger or wider strategy, what we found is that where you have Newtown, you also have very close to it a proposed bus park and ride being developed at Kilpedder, and that's part of a larger infrastructure that is supposed to support people moving into buses as they would move to Dublin or to other settlements for work. So looking at that, and from the discussions we had also around the cycleway infrastructure, the idea of having improved cycleway infrastructure to bring people from Newtown to Kilpedder to close to that bus park and ride became a potentially feasible option, so that you would find a dedicated route bringing people towards that cycle infrastructure and that bus change. The idea of e-bikes was mooted as well. That was one of the original ideas that came up in the first workshop. There are a lot of positives around the e-bikes. We have seen them in places like Westport, which population-wise is probably quite similar to where Newtown is going now at the moment, and being quite successful. We have heard back that there was a scheme within the Greystones area, and part of the feedback that we got here was that they felt it potentially wouldn't work. Although mostly the feedback is positive, there was concerns about abandoned bikes, bikes being left, not having enough space for those bikes to be used efficiently. So the Greystone scheme exists, and there has been challenges around that, but they're working with the provider to improve it. So a potential here is that the scheme within Greystones, once they've worked out all of the teething problems, that could be brought forward and extended, so that Newtown, Bray, all of the other surrounding towns and villages could benefit from it. So it would be an extension of a scheme rather than a new one. Then looking at permeability, so this is the idea that the walking and cycling infrastructure we put into the town would have different routes from the main roads that you typically use. So we have the motorway, we have the main roads through Newtown, we have the secondary roads, and we have the residential streets and the residential dead ends. So this is a very common way of developing housing in Ireland and in Britain, where you have housing essentially isolated as areas with maybe one in and one out, road infrastructure. It means that if you want to take a walk, for example, from Mayor Park into the centre of town, that could take 16 minutes. However, if we're to create new connections through that 16-minute journey, might be reduced down to 10 minutes. Or for example, a walk here that's 9 minutes could be reduced down to 5 minutes. So by creating permeability through the town, we actually make it easier for people to move around it. So this was one of the original images to show what that might look like. Again, generally very positive, over 90% of people saying that they approved of it, and most people saying that they approved of it as it was proposed. There was concerns around security, or people being worried about strangers using their street. So I suppose this is a point that we often come up against, and one of the challenges here is actually understanding what does create unsafe spaces. And what all of the research says is that once you have a place that is well lit and that has good footfall, that's what will create or prevent crime from happening in an area. The danger is when you have a place that's not well lit, or where there's not many eyes on the streets, where you have vacancy. That's where places become dangerous. So in a situation like this, if we were creating more permeable streets, the goal would actually be to make them generous and open and have them lit, so that they're going to be attractive for people to use, and they're going to be safer spaces. The next project is around the community area where we are at the moment, and the connections through that, and how it works currently at the moment is a two-way system with a one-way section close to the junction, and that creates issues at the moment with traffic, especially during drop-off times, so traffic can often back up at that junction. The original proposal we had was looking at a one-way system, so how we could reduce the squeeze, I suppose, at that junction by changing the flow of traffic, so that you would be able to have more continuous flow. And by removing one lane, you would be able to provide a drop-off lane, which would mean that it's easier to drop kids off at beginning and end of the day. So in general, that was quite well received, nearly 90%, and again, looking at it as proposed, but there was a sense that you could go further and actually even close the street. The idea that it could be trialled, which I think is important actually for all of the ideas we're looking at here, is that before they would be implemented, that there would always be trials to make sure that they're working as intended. But some of the feedback was to go further, and we explored that so as an idea. So what if, rather than having that as a one-way street, we actually looked at pedestrianising that for walking and for cycling, and having a drop-off, so that you could drop the kids off close to the school, but that they were going to be able to walk, and they had a safe connection, and potentially an extension of what the school grounds are. And this is actually a policy that's very often linked in with schools, with An Taisce, the idea of safe routes to school. And it does look at how we can make our children's experience most safe, how we can ensure that not only worries of traffic but also worries of fumes become allayed. So having programs like this, where we sort of extend the school area and make it safe, have had very positive impacts on safety and well-being. So what we're looking at here really is two options for this area. One being the more extreme intervention to totally pedestrianise it, and the other one being the simplification of it by adding a one-way traffic street. And what we would propose within a plan like this is that at a feasibility stage, both options would be looked at, that studies would be done to see what would be more efficient, that there would be further engagement with the different stakeholders, and then through series of trials, a final proposal on that would be made.
Sorry, have you looked to see why the congestion is there in the first place? Because obviously the new roads that are coming in will significantly ease that congestion going forward.
Yes.
So the congestion at the moment is schools coming, all the cars directly coming up from Seasons Park. That will go away when the back road from Seasons Park is open.
Okay.
And a lot of Wicklow Hills coming down to school, that will go away when the back road is open. So I'm just wondering, have you also factored in the new roads that are intending to open?
Yeah, so that was the idea, that there would be a feasibility study done on the project. So what we will be doing is saying that there's a number of options that could be tested, and that we would get a consultant in to look at that and exactly look at all of those flows and traffic counts and make sure that whatever is being proposed is going to be feasibly correct and implementable.
So the proposal will include also a recommendation to assess the new roads and traffic.
Exactly, yeah.
Any of those options are looked at.
Absolutely, yeah. So
there's no mention, is that ring road there at the back going to connect with the M11?
Yeah.
We'll take any, just like we said at the start, get through his presentation and take any question at the end then. Is that okay?
Yeah. Thanks, guys. So one of the other ideas that was looked at was the idea of having a connection through Glenbrook, so that would link into where the Dunn Stores is, and the challenge there was around traffic at the junction and at the main street. So we looked at two proposals for that, two options that could be feasible to connect in there. Again, looking at the community feedback, that was very positive, but what we felt and what we had understood was that there was going to be issues because of ownership areas around Glenbrook, and what could be more feasible in terms of encouraging access there would be to have a pedestrian access route. So the proposal would, rather than having car traffic moving into that area, that you open a new pedestrian route to allow the residents up above the schools to be able to connect in, to link through that community site and into Dunn's, or for the childcare or the different facilities that exist around Glenbrook. Traffic light delays, that was something very high on people's agenda, and that was something where we proposed a roundabout as a solution that could be implemented. We've talked through this with the council, and we've asked them to provide additional information on what sort of studies or numbers they have on that area, to make sure that whatever solution would be put in place is going to be suitable and is going to work longer term, considering the additional traffic that will be included there. The next proposal was around the main street itself. So we have around 62 parking spaces along the main street in total. The section as it looks at the moment is something like this, and what we proposed originally from the community's first round of ideas was the idea that you would have cycle infrastructure going through that, looking potentially something like this. So again, this was one where the feedback in general was mostly positive, but actually quite a substantial number of people, around a third of people, felt that the idea wasn't the best one, and also nearly 50% felt that it wasn't best as proposed. One of the key areas around here is reducing the space, making the roads too narrow in several areas. Also a question around the reduction of parking, and potentially to provide alternative places for people to park. So looking at how we could actually simplify that, how we could extend the public realm space to give more room for people who are walking, and making sure that there's more vibrancy on the street. Then another idea was looking at a one-way traffic system. So the key ambition here really is to reduce the pressure on the main street. So currently it takes around 2 minutes from people to go from Fishers down through to the end of the corner at the business centre. I'd say that is probably 2 minutes when you're lucky and it's not an awful lot of pressure in the town. It also says then it would take around 3 minutes to deviate around, so it's showing that there's not a huge amount of difference in terms of time between the more direct route and the more scenic route. So the proposal here was looking at how we could deviate or divert one of the traffic flows, and that would either be from Dublin or to Dublin. Again, there was quite a high percentage of people for it, but around a third of people against it, and a slightly higher percentage of people for it as proposed. Some people saying that something like this would be preferable, and others saying that it would be too long to go around. So we're getting a mix of feedback on an idea like this. The main benefit of something like this, of course, is that you can free up a lot more space, and that would also give more space for designated parking within the street. So you create a freer, more vibrant area with a place for people to stop. And what we're looking at here is how do we not just create a place that is vibrant but also resilient. So bringing in planting that would help with drainage and help improve the soils within the town. Some examples here from Sheffield of what that can look like. So with both of those ideas, I suppose the one-way system and the improvements to the street, again, it will be looking at two options and saying, as a further development, we would need a traffic study to understand the feasibility of these and how they would be best implemented. So that brings us on to the public realm. We have issues around vibrancy, and the key challenges or key strategies that we're proposing are to provide generous public space, to make the public realm inclusive and accessible, to integrate climate resilience, to include trees and greenery, to showcase historic spaces and buildings, to encourage vibrancy, and to create a distinct town branding. So the first one, looking at the idea of town branding, linking in with the woodland heritage of Newtown, the large woodland areas, the proximity to Quilcha having its headquarters here, and I suppose the proximity to the Wicklow Mountains as well, that you would lean into that as an idea, something that would be consistent throughout the town. Very positive feedback towards that as an idea. There was concerns around using timber and making sure that it would be treated and sustainable. So whatever implementation of this would have to have all of those considerations in place. The next one then links to the facade and colour scheme of the town. We had looked at, for example, places like Kinsale or Dingle, and showing that you can make a place more attractive. So this was as previously proposed, and the feedback here was again quite positive, but some sense that colours were too bright, that it needs to keep more in character with the area. So rather than having something that is very, I suppose, bold, could we simplify it down to colours and tones that would be more suitable for Newtown? And additionally to that, we know that the town team and a subsection within the town team is already working on guidelines that could become part of an appendix to this plan, looking at best practice in terms of how we can improve shop fronts within the town. So the public realm improvements, we've highlighted a key number of areas here, some squares, some important building or public realm spaces, and the idea here was to improve those and to make them more attractive. So 100% of people felt that this was important and should be followed through, with 90% of people saying that it was good as proposed. So the first area here was Fisher's Junction, the main space that you see as you enter Newtown. So is there a way that that could be made more accessible or more inviting? So this was the previous proposal as set out. Looking at that, some people were positive. There was concerns around ownership, and this is also something we need to work into in this workshop, is understanding who the key stakeholders are, trying to see would they be on board with bringing some of these ideas forward into a plan. We've also had some input from a heritage consultant who has talked about the importance of the walls around the building, so showing how they could be retained while also improving the attractiveness of the area. Then in terms of the square outside of the park view, again we had a previous proposal looking at how we make that more accessible. We've got feedback on that, and we've looked at simplifying and cleaning that, so making sure that it's still going to be an attractive space, but retaining things like the heritage wall, which is actually part of the old bridge, getting rid of the cycleways, so it's actually about opening it up and bringing nature in rather than adding too many additional elements. Still also with a potential access down to a future potential park. The next one then is up at the St. Joseph's Church. The proposal here was again looking at how this is the previous proposal, and we had two sort of steps for that. One, removing the fence. So looking at that, we had some people very positive around those moves, some less positive. We also engaged the heritage consultant on that, and the feeling is that retaining the fence is important, but it is possible to make that a more generous gathering space and a welcoming space for people that shows the building off. Moving into the next section, which is outside of Eugene's, there's a sort of a plaza area there, so this is standing on that space, and then looking down, we had this proposal about making that area more accessible, and sense that there was plans for building, or plans underway for buildings, and also looking at the levelled area, making sure that that was going to be fully accessible, and some feedback then around making it more inviting for people. So how can we simplify that? The area behind where this picture is taken is a larger plateau, so the goal here would be to integrate that also, so it's not just the area down towards the south, but also the area up from this, linking close to St. Joseph's. Then the last, or second to last one here, was the memorial of 1798, and seeing how we could improve that to make it more inviting as a space, potentially as a memorial garden as well, and linking to that with the idea of a heritage trail. This is something that was generally quite positively fed back on, and what was mentioned was that we hadn't included St. Matthew's. We hadn't brought that into the previous presentation. In terms of public realm space, we didn't feel there was an awful lot we could do, but on reflection, there is. We can make it a safer crossing area. We've looked at the widths of the roads, so you can see 10.5 metres, which is quite wide overall, but actually a lot of that space has gone over to the carriageway lanes, 7.2 metres. You only really need around 3 metres for a car carriageway. So what we could do is improve accessibility at that zone, making it safer for people to move across, but also improving the materiality in the area. All of these then are part of what is an existing heritage trail, and that has been established. So how can we best show that off? By bringing signage, showing what is hidden, and making those key areas prominent so that people can see them. And this could be part really of the identity of Newtown, showing off its heritage. Very positive in that, 100% of people agreeing with the idea, with only 2% of people feeling that it could be improved. and some of the comments around that were about including the Irish language, which we think is very positive, and making sure again that the accessibility of the language is very important. Then we're moving into green spaces, challenges around the areas not being connected or accessible, underutilised. So the proposal here, the key strategies are to connect existing green assets, to connect and extend woodlands to create a variety of spaces. And the first project here is the linear park, which exists, but to connect it and integrate it more wholly is really the goal here. So linking existing and developing green spaces. So we have this park, which is, I suppose, now finished at this stage, but a potentially great new asset for the town. We have some of the sports fields, the Kelly community grounds, the potential to connect in with schools, the campaign to support and fund facilities, and the idea that if you create a holistic green area that links in all of these different elements, you're able to pool funding and you're able to provide facilities that all can benefit from. So an example of what that could look like, also using the hills and the slopes of that area and the potential to connect down into water and to benefit from that as well. Very positive in terms of general feedback. And some additional elements that we could consider, the idea of the pump track, adding permeability between pitches, different things that would have to be worked out in a feasibility study. Then the Valley Passes Heritage Park, so a plot of land exists across from the linear park. So with this new plaza, the new square that could happen outside of Parkview, is there a potential to connect through that into a potential heritage park for the benefit of the town? A place that would have walled gardens, that might have tea rooms and a heritage centre, that could have heritage gardens, the mill being brought back into use in some form, having river connections, even having ferry trails. The existing old walled garden, having that as an orchard or a community vegetable garden, having the house brought back as a commercial entity potentially, and the woods as a place that would be accessible but done in a sensitive manner that's not going to damage the natural beauty of the area. So 100% of people in favour of this as an idea, and generally also as it's been proposed. Linking from that, the idea of an amphitheatre. Besides the site where the Valley Passes area is, we have a natural amphitheatre, really, a sort of a scoop within the land that would lead itself towards having seating and having events. So this is as we proposed it previously, a seating area with a stage. Generally people very positive again about this idea, and as it's proposed. We did get feedback that it should be natural, that it should retain an agricultural feeling. So looking at the idea of having this integrated within the landscape, not as something concrete or hard, but using natural materials, a place that could act as a field when it's not in use as a stage, and then as a performance area again. Also an alternative location, potentially having a stage across the far side of the stream. And then linking to the idea of the heritage park again, the idea that the mill would be reused. People felt very positively about this and the form it would take. We had different ideas and proposals around that with feedback on all of these. We're currently working with a heritage specialist to understand what would the most appropriate use of a space like this be. Then we're moving into green space activation. So we've already talked about the parks, but there's other green spaces within local housing estates, along connected roads. So how can we best utilise and improve those areas? Bringing in native woodland, for example, or pollinator planting. An example of a project we've worked on over the last number of years is a community garden that was developed in a housing estate in Ballina. Here we worked with the community to define what it was they really wanted from an area of unused land. So the proposal that ultimately came out was a community garden with rain garden spaces, so that it would help with flooding or with reducing damp within the area, but also allowing locals to grow food within the green. So looking at an open green space like this, could it become a pocket park? Could it become residence gardens? In general, people were positive with the idea, with some people less positive in terms of how it was being proposed. The feedback here was that you need green space for kids to play football, and that is very important. So making sure that any proposals around the use of green space would have all residents' support, but also that it would be designed in a way that didn't take over. So could you only reduce areas or only pick small spaces that could be used for other activities? And just some examples of those different activities and where they might happen throughout the town. The next one is into connected woodlands. So those various green spaces that exist are also linked towards the linear park, to the woodland area close to the Creechia headquarters, and the extended woodland area that goes towards the south, the Creechia owned lands. Could we have a connection that would link all of those through together? The feedback generally here very positive. 98% would be in favour, 98% in favour as it would be proposed. The sense here was, yes, it's a very good thing and it should be, it should go forward, but there's questions around ownership of land and it being realistic. So I suppose looking towards the workshop today, how could we imagine that something like this could be brought forward? What would the stakeholders that would be brought on board need to be, and what would the steps need to be to realise an ambition like this? Now moving into community services, this is an area that people felt very strongly about, that although the town has grown rapidly, the services haven't grown to meet it. And that's everything from the Garda station not being full-time, to not having enough school places, to not having enough places for young people. So the strategies here are to define potential sites for community services, to propose combining complementary elements so that you join functions together, propose combining complementary functions for efficiency of space, consider future town growth in service provision. We have a new creche and a new community centre currently under construction that are being built out of timber, CLT, so linking again to the idea of Creechia, to the landscape of the town. This becomes the potential theme or brand or identity that Newtown can link into and build from. One of the key asks was having a civic centre or a library, and a site was identified, council-owned land across from Eugene's and across from St. Joseph's as a potential area for that. So looking at that as an area that could fulfill a civic centre, a library, maybe a space for events and activities. Again, people very positive about that idea, and up to 96% were positive in terms of how it was proposed. Then the idea of a community service quarter. This is in some of the backland areas behind the main street. looking at how we could create a courtyard for retail, for youth services, for family centre, and for a GP. In general, people were very positive about that and how it was proposed. We have got feedback, however, that this is there are already plans for this land that are in development. So as part of this project, it's something that we won't be bringing forward because there's plans in place for that area. Then looking at the new schools that are being proposed or that have been identified as a site for an additional primary school and secondary school, can we tie those again in with this ambition of being a forest town where timber is at the heart of these buildings to make them attractive, warm, friendly, healthy places for kids. So the buildings themselves, but also then the landscape, making sure that you bring nature in around the school. And this could be a key, I suppose, a key example of how Newtown brings the values of outdoor and nature through to its education facilities as well. People positive about this, over 92% or 92% in favour, and nearly 90% in favour as proposed. Some questions about whether you should bring the forest to the school or the school to the forest. But in a situation like this where you already have an identified site, the easiest thing to do is to think long term and imagine how you could develop the site to meet the needs. Then we're moving into employment and commerce. Questions here about empty units, the need for local businesses to provide jobs locally, lack of retail space and dereliction. Key strategies here were identifying key opportunity sites, encouraging functions matched to the image of the town, encourage mixed use areas, reuse of vacant structures, densification of the urban core. The first project is looking at mixed-use development on the periphery of the town. The idea here originally was that this could become part of that park and ride facility, that you would have a mix of offices and retail. Nearly 90% of people in favour of that, and 87% in favour as proposed. There was concerns though around putting in additional retail, around the need to retain green spaces. So is there a balance had where something like this could mix in nature, that you could develop the site sensitively, so still having an alternative for provision of jobs and retail, but not doing it in a way that is going to consume the whole site, and also providing a buffer of green space for the residents. Then the next proposal here is around the Gateway Centre. So this building, which is Quilcha owned, to the north of Newtown, close to the old entrance to the Mount Kennedy estate, having that as a community facility, so a place with bike rental, for example, if it links into the mountains to the Sea Greenway, a place for a cafe or an exhibition space, and as originally proposed also with treetop activities. So the idea was very well received, 93% in favour, 87% of people in favour as proposed. There was concerns about having the treetop activities, having a space potentially for young people, having the scouts involved, giving them a home. So the revised proposal looks not at having woodland or treetop activities, but more focusing on woodland activities and providing a home for the scouts or for other clubs that would benefit from an area like this. Then the agricultural centre, this was an idea that was brought forward in the initial storytelling workshop, a site very close to where we are at the moment, behind one of the schools. We had different proposals around this, so there was various ideas brought to the table. An agricultural centre, which people felt very positively about. The idea that it would be co-op run, that it would provide food for people locally and sustainably, looking at social enterprise models as examples of how that could be delivered. We also had proposals around the dog park. Again, sort of a mix of positive and negative feedback on that. Biodiversity area, people saying yes, other people saying we don't need more green space. A youth centre, so having place for young people to hang out, places to gather and to spend time. So again, positive and negative, but generally this one was very positively received. So the proposal here is that you would have a mixed multi-generational area, that you have a place for younger people, but also you can integrate things like growing of food, you can bring nature into it, so it becomes a sort of rich mix of all of these different functions that benefit from each other. An example of this is in the Netherlands, where you have beside itself, you have growing, you have outdoor activity, you have young people on a pump track here in that instance, and all of those things can be combined within one space, sharing the same facilities again. The next piece is around town densification. So the local area plans already identify areas to be further developed, and the goal here, I suppose, is to make sure we have enough activity within the town to make sure that stays vibrant. So how can we improve the density of the street? How can we add functions that could bring businesses or that could bring retail? And how could we reinforce the main street? So we've identified a few key potential sites from Church Street to Glenbrook, the main street, and then towards the business centre. By and large, people are very positive about this, 90% in favour and 88% in favour as proposed. So there was a concern about having too many houses and not enough developed amenities. So looking at something like this, you would be prioritising, making sure that the facilities that are needed within the town would go into these areas, also limiting it in terms of height so that the developments aren't too big. But in general, the idea of reinforcing and densifying the town centre was well received. So moving into sustainable urban growth, a proposal around sustainable energy. We have, for example, Claremorris, which is a very similar sized population to Newtown. It was the fastest growing town in Ireland in 2017. They have 2 or I think even 3 now community solar farms within the area. Also Killala, which is close to where I'm from, the first community-owned wind farm in the country. So there's examples of where communities through SECs, sustainable energy communities, have developed projects that are for the benefit of the wider community. So is there proposals or locations around the town that projects like this could be implemented? And again, very positive feedback, 96% of people would be in favour and 92% as proposed. So in a proposal like this, of course, to identify the exact locations of where something like that would happen would be very difficult. So the goal or the aim here would be to say that something like this should be progressed, but from the community and for its benefit. Then sustainable growth, and I think this is the last of all of the projects. So there is a new road according to the development plan to link Garden Village through to the Kilcoo Road. Rather than developing constantly to the west, there's an opportunity to densify and to consolidate the town centre. So could we look at developing to the east, where you would be able to build in future? And this, importantly, isn't a proposal to build. This is a proposal to respond to when new building comes, that you do it in a sustainable way. potentially mixing activities, so you don't just have residential in isolation, but you can bring community functions, work, residential all into one active and accessible space. So the proposal here, 86% would be in favour of it, and 89% of people in favour of it as proposed. So what we've done here is reached out to the future planning team within the local authority to understand the feasibility of something like this and how that might be developed longer term as part of development plans. So here you can see development to the east as from some of the community members, a good idea. Some concerns around it, making sure that it would happen in an appropriate manner. So the future image of Newtown, we've looked at the ambitions, people wanting this idea of a gateway to the gardens of Ireland, better bus routes, better road systems. We want schools self-sufficient with amenities, family friendly, local, resilient, jobs equals no commuting, great place to live and work in. Climate resilient town, a green town centre, welcoming social green space. The idea of Ireland's forest town, something that you can look at as a long-term objective. And all of these different ambitions are what we're trying to implement into the plan. So the next step is to have a look at those proposals again, to go in more detail on how we can hope to realise them, and that's what we're going to get you guys to do over the next 40 minutes to an hour.
So thank you very much, Stephen. We're back.